Welcome to The Explainer. You know that feeling when you're just drowning in like 30 different browser tabs trying to figure out which credit card is actually going to give you the best miles for a trip to Tokyo? Or maybe you're hunting for a personal loan that doesn't have those crazy hidden fees. Yeah, it's a universal headache. Well, that's exactly where we come in. We do the heavy lifting so you don't have to. We take these incredibly complex, literally 140-page SC Form 20F filings, and we transform them into a clear visual business breakdown. Today, we're investigating the absolute financial matchmaker of Greater Southeast Asia, MoneyHero Group. Now, if you've ever compared financial products online in that region, there's a really good chance you've already interacted with their tech. But what actually happens behind the scenes of a platform that's supposedly free to use? Let's find out. All right, let's just jump right into our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll meet the MoneyHero Group. Second, we're going to unpack the revenue engine. Third, we'll examine the 2025 financial scorecard. And finally, we will outline the risks ahead. Let's get to it. Section 1. Meet the MoneyHero Group, uncovering Greater Southeast Asia's financial matchmaker. We're kicking off our business anatomy breakdown with the sheer, massive scale of their footprint across the region. Okay, so the absolute crucial point here is this massive number. As of December 2025, MoneyHero boasted approximately 9.4 million members across their platforms. Just let that sink in for a second. 9.4 million. We're talking about millions of registered users, email subscribers, and rewards members who are all actively seeking financial guidance. And why does this matter so much? Well, Greater Southeast Asia is definitely not a monolith, right? It's a highly fragmented market. You've got vastly different banking regulations, totally different languages, and unique consumer habits in every single country. So to amass nearly 10 million highly engaged users in such a complex geographical area, that is a monumental feat of user acquisition. I mean, in 2025 alone, the platforms averaged over 3.1 million page views every single month.
And this right here brilliantly illustrates exactly how they pulled that off. Rather than forcing one single monolithic brand name across all these vastly different cultures, they operate under highly recognizable localized brands. You've got MoneyHero in Hong Kong, SingSaver over in Singapore, Money 101 in Taiwan, and MoneyMax in the Philippines. They also run community platforms like Seedly and a B2B network called Creatory. By staying hyper-local in their branding, they build deep, essential trust with consumers who are just trying to navigate these incredibly distinct and localized credit card, loan, and insurance markets. At the end of the day, people want financial advice from a brand that feels native to their own home country.
So ultimately, these localized platforms act as the ultimate matchmaker. They're taking ready-to-transact consumers and introducing them directly to blue-chip global financial institutions. In 2025, this matchmaking led to over 1.6 million applications for financial products, which then resulted in over 700,000 actual approvals. If you do the math on that, it means nearly 44% of the people who apply through their matchmaking funnel actually get approved by a bank. That is a highly efficient funnel. It translates a massive amount of consumer intent into real-world profitable financial products.
Moving right along to Section 2. The revenue engine, how free financial comparison platforms actually generate cash. Let's look at how all this consumer intent actually builds into a real business model. Because remember, MoneyHero doesn't actually sell its own financial products. They're not the ones issuing your credit card. They're not underwriting your loan. What they're actually selling are leads and clicks.
Now, if you dig into their SEC filings, which, let's be honest, can be a bit dry, you're going to see a lot of industry jargon. But the single most important term you need to understand is RPAA, or Revenue Per Approved Application. This simply translates to getting paid a bounty, but only when a bank actually approves the credit card or loan that you applied for through their site. They do use other models too, like revenue per click and revenue per lead, but the core concept across the board is exactly the same. The financial institutions are basically paying MoneyHero a finder's fee for delivering a viable, fully vetted customer straight to their digital doorstep.
But here is what's absolutely wild about this breakdown. Look at the overwhelming dominance of those internet leads. When we look at their 2025 revenue streams, a staggering 86.5% of their money comes strictly from internet leads generation and marketing services. Out of their total $73.4 million in revenue for the year, over $63 million came just from this lead generation engine alone. Insurance commissions and other marketing income, they make up a much smaller slice of the pie. This overwhelming dominance of internet leads is exactly what powers their engine today. But definitely keep that in the back of your mind because it sets up a massive vulnerability that we're going to explore a bit later in the explainer. Geographically, the business is incredibly well balanced between their dual headquarters. Notice those two towering bars right there on the left? Hong Kong generated 42.4% of their revenue, and Singapore was right on its heels at 42.1%. The Philippines brought in 10%, with Taiwan making up the bulk of the remainder. This basically tells us they are highly dependent on the mature, wealthy financial ecosystems of Hong Kong and Singapore to keep the lights on and the engine running, while treating places like the Philippines as developing growth markets. Which brings us to Section 3, the 2025 Financial Scorecard, the unexpected plot twist in the latest SEC filings. This is easily the most fascinating part of their Form 20F. If you look closely at the numbers, there is a major plot twist regarding their profitability.
Over the last 3 years, we're seeing this really clear, but honestly, kind of counterintuitive trend. Their top-line revenue has actually been dropping slightly year over year. It fell from about $80.6 million in 2023 down to $79.5 million in 2024 and finally landed at $73.4 million in 2025. Now, in a growth-obsessed tech world, you might look at that declining revenue and immediately assume, uh-oh, the business is in deep trouble. After all, tech companies are supposed to grow revenue at all costs, right?
Well, here is the financial twist. Notice how that net loss drastically shrinks. Despite bringing in slightly less revenue, they have aggressively, and I mean aggressively, cut their net losses. Back in 2023, they posted a staggering net loss of $172.6 million. By 2024, they slashed that down to $37.7 million. And by the end of 2025, their net loss was a mere $5.1 million. How did they do it? They achieved this by fundamentally pivoting from a growth-at-all-costs mindset to one of survival and efficiency. They significantly pulled back on their costs and expenses, dropping them from roughly $110 million in 2023 down to just $79 million in 2025. So they are doing slightly less business, but they're doing it far, far more efficiently.
Now, actually managing that level of efficiency across a bunch of different borders, that requires some serious financial gymnastics. If you stare at this original diagram from their filing long enough, you might legitimately get a headache. But what we're really uncovering here is a dense, highly structured web of intercompany transfers. Because they operate across so many borders, their cash doesn't just sit comfortably in one local bank account.
So let's just simplify that dense table for a second. It basically boils down to a necessary 3-step process. First, working capital loans originate from their holding entities over in the Cayman Islands. Second, those funds are then used to pay for service fees, management, and tech support that's constantly flowing back and forth between their operating hubs in Singapore and Hong Kong. And third, those funds are finally dispersed as capital contributions to their local entities, like their insurance brokerages in the Philippines. Why does this matter? Well, it highlights exactly how massive global tech companies optimize their taxes and operational cash flow. They're moving money seamlessly without getting crushed by local friction.
Finally, let's hit Section 4, the risks ahead. Navigating the tightrope to long-term profitability. To wrap up our business breakdown, we need to explore the final section of their filing, the inherent risks in this matchmaking model. Because look, as much as their losses have narrowed, operating as a digital middleman in the financial sector is never a guaranteed win. The SEC filing actually outlines a bunch of key risks, but the one that absolutely stands out the most relates to how they get their users. Remember those 9.4 million members and that massive reliance on internet leads? Well, here's the catch. 67% of their traffic sessions and 68% of their monthly unique users come organically through unpaid channels. Basically, they rely heavily on showing up at the top of Google searches for terms like best cashback card. That is fantastic for their profit margins right now, but it means they are highly, highly vulnerable to any changes in search engine algorithms. If their organic traffic drops, their user acquisition costs will suddenly spike through the roof. Combine that with a scenario where, say, a major commercial bank decides to lower the bounty they pay per approved application, and MoneyHero's delicate path to profitability could be entirely derailed. Plus, they face evolving, strict data privacy regulations across multiple countries. That's a major hurdle when your entire business model relies on collecting, verifying, and passing along sensitive consumer financial data.
In fact, they state this reality super plainly right in the risk factors of the document. Quote, "We have a history of losses, and we may not achieve or maintain profitability in the future." Now sure, this is standard required disclosure language, but it's an incredibly important reminder for investors. Despite expertly navigating their cost structure and narrowing their losses by over 97% since 2023, historical performance simply does not guarantee future success. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, with their net losses shrinking to just a hair over $5 million, the ultimate question to take away from this explainer is clear. Can this tech-powered matchmaker cross that final hurdle into true profitability in the years to come? Or are the rising costs of user acquisition, shifting search algorithms, and evolving bank payouts going to keep them just shy of the finish line? Keep an eye on Greater Southeast Asia's digital economy to find out. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next explainer.